All right. Holly J, you're on.
Okay. If it's okay with you, I'll go ahead and share my screen. We've got a short PowerPoint to go through some of the results that we came up with. Let me just...
You should be able to.
Yep, I'm just pulling it up. Okay. All right, is that working for everyone okay?
It is working great. And actually, I was going to toss in a prompt here before that I just remembered,
Sure.
just to, like, if it's useful for anyone. I was thinking about listening for specifically for, you know, some of the things that I think you're going to bring up, but like gaps in terms of business development support that are either things that I know are out there that I'm going to want to make sure that we all know about, or that stand out as like opportunities. So I guess the first wouldn't be gaps, but you know, things that come up that you talk about that we know there's resources for. And then if there's time in discussion, I think that would be really good just to kind of call out as this group has gathered. So sorry to
Yeah, no, Tanya, I really appreciate that. I hope the rest of the group is listening kind of with the same lens, because, you know, one of the things we don't want to do with this work is reinvent a bunch of stuff that's already been done. And so we're at this phase now where we finished the research and we're starting the education section of it. And so like any sort of resources that are valid and that feed into this work definitely need to be a part of our programming.
Great. And I don't know if you can change it, but your presentation is sort of off to the left a little. Maybe that's how it's supposed to be.
No, we're not seeing the whole screen here.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure why though.
Let me see. I'll just try setting up the screen sharing again. Let's see. Okay. How is that? Is that any better?
Now there's not. It just says you just started.
And how about this?
Why don't you try this? Well, it might. I could try to share if you want to put the presentation link in the chat, or if you don't want to do that, I don't know if I'll have any more luck, but we could try.
I can start sharing too, because
I
have the presentation.
Yeah, why don't you try? That's working.
That's working. Okay, great.
Okay,
thanks
so
for your
Jay,
patience.
you just taught me when you want me to flip through it.
Cool. So yeah, our producer needs survey and interviews that we did were part of a PMP grant through SARE called Building Sustainable Farm Resiliency through Farmer Center Business Solutions. And again, as we mentioned, the goal here, we know there's a lot of great resources, technical production-oriented resources out there for farmers. But what we've heard repeatedly through a lot of our CSA member farms is that there are specific business aspects that they're still struggling with, that they have trouble finding the resources for. They may be out there, but access seems to be an issue. So we wanted to determine what those resources were that they were struggling to find, how they learn best, and how we can get all of those or improve access to all of those resources as well. So the first phase of this grant is this producer needs survey assessment that we've been working on for the past few months. And we did both a survey that was open to anyone through a Google form, and then more detailed interviews with farmers as well. We can go to the next slide. Oh, and I should mention a big part of what we did as well was to have a farmer core team be a part of this grant, so that our efforts were informed by farmers and led by farmers, and we're going to attempt to orient the solutions to be led by farmers and informed by them as well. So in terms of who participated, we got a huge diversity of farmers, as few as 2 years in the business or as many as 47. But a majority of them were interested in scaling their operations, and most of them were either CSA farms predominantly, or their main sales outlets were through farmers markets. So a lot of direct to consumer. In terms of their preferred learning methods, what we found was that mentorship was by far the most preferred, and then written fact sheets and reading books, sort of static sources of information, as well as hands-on demonstrations and in-person events. What we did notice was that there was very little favorability towards accessing resources through Zoom meetings or events that they needed to attend to digitally. And in terms of what we saw the main business goal from the farms being, it was improving profitability, and then concern about providing living wages for their employees and for themselves, which I don't think was too surprising. I was kind of surprised to see work-life balance not as high up there, but I think that that speaks to how selfless a lot of farmers are, more than it not being an issue necessarily. But it was really interesting to see where the priorities really lied there. So a lot of it is in that profitability and creating a sustainable wage for themselves and their employees. In terms of general business management challenges, we found the most responses in accessing professionals, specifically finding a good bookkeeper, offering farm-specific health insurance, and tax preparers who were familiar with agriculture. And this was sort of a theme we saw in interviews in more detail, was that there are professionals out there who do these things, but farms, specifically small direct-to-consumer farms, tend to have very specific needs that a lot of the majority of tax preparers or bookkeepers may not be equipped with the understanding of how to deal with. And cost was also an issue for farmers. We also brought up the possibility of whether they were struggling with organic certification or licensing questions. Not many farmers responded as that being an issue. Aside from in the interviews, people did focus on the fact that there were particularly cumbersome processes for licensing, like scale certification. They mentioned as being something that was really cumbersome. But they were able to do it. It just took more time than they'd like to. A little more detail about accessing professionals, financial advisors and bookkeepers. Again, there was a large demand for farm mentors specifically, and just having the specific and very specialized information and knowledge that you can kind of only get by doing this yourself. So a lot of people mentioned that they would like farm mentors, and we know there are some great programs out there that many of y'all are working with that we could help connect farmers to as part of this project. And then lawyers and CPAs, again, technical professionals that have farm-specific knowledge. Insurance agents, marketing professionals, and agronomists were also issues, but they were sort of secondary. I think there were fewer than a quarter of respondents that that mentioned those as specifically needing better access to. In terms of employee management, by and large, benefits were the biggest issue, creating, I think, benefits packages that would help retain employees and make it worth their time. And I think healthcare for this industry is a really difficult thing for a lot of farms, and that was brought up in other questions. But interestingly, recruitment was not a big issue. I thought it was also interesting that many of our farms didn't have issues with H-2A employees. And so I think we seem to be able to find farmers locally, but retaining them or paying them and compensating them in ways that we think is fair tends to be an issue for a lot of farmers. In terms of marketing, the most difficulty was, I think, differentiating from the competition. There's so many great farms out here, and standing out now seems to be one of the bigger issues. Writing specific marketing copy and coming up with the content for social media marketing were both struggles. In the interviews, people brought up that even when they know how to do great social media marketing, it's extremely time consuming. And a lot of respondents mentioned that they wish they had sort of someone floating around the farm to capture the footage that they felt they needed to do effective social media marketing. And then web design, I think, again, farmers are expected to wear so many hats to begin with. To add being able to design your own website on top of that is just asking a lot in terms of technical information. And I do think now there's a lot of potential with AI to help make things a little bit easier. I will say it's worth noting less than half of participants face specific marketing issues. But among those half, these were the issues that they struggled with. And then in terms of grant access, in general, a lot of, again, this is, I think, out of a total of maybe 28 respondents, so a majority had issues accessing, discovering, or applying to grants. And in the interviews, they went into detail about specifically what they were looking for in those grants, and it tended to be specifically for equipment or infrastructure or supplies, which, while there's these things like the NRCS out there, we know a lot of them tend to be focused more around research than around providing loans. And so that may be part of the issue, but regardless, a lot of farmers expressed an interest in discovering and being able to apply for those grants and learning how that process works so that they're familiar with it. Interestingly, among educational technical resources, we listed kind of all aspects of production, weed management, soil management, crop rotation, all of these things. And there were almost no respondents that said that they had issues with any of that except for machinery maintenance, where I think it was over half of respondents mentioned that they wanted some help with that. And I think this is something where older tractors, it's a pretty specific set of information. It could be beneficial to address that through farm mentoring or through classes, basic engine maintenance. But this seemed like something that is really pressing. You know, when your tractor breaks down in the middle of the season, it can really put a halt in your operations. So by and large, machinery maintenance was the biggest educational technical resource that people felt they needed help with. And regarding farm-to-farm interactions, again, out of 28 respondents, this was another one where a majority of farmers mentioned that they wanted to see more farmer-to-farmer interactions. One or many mentioned that group bulk ordering was something that they felt was long overdue and that we were very capable of, but they needed help in organizing. Again, farm mentoring is something that every farmer or most farmers said they wanted. And there's been a lot of talk about creating more intentional on-farm gatherings, whether that's on a specific farm or at an event space. A lot of farmers alluded to like Brighton Bush and past events where farmers were just able to get together in the off season and just talk really and discover what issues and what overlap there were and share solutions in real time. Again, this highlights how virtual gathering is not really favored by farmers. And in hindsight, if we could have done this over again, I think we would have asked a little bit more detail about what aspects of virtual gathering farmers didn't like, because it can be one of the more convenient ones, but there was definitely a strong push towards social and in-person interactions. So in terms of next steps, again, as we mentioned, as Holly and Tanya brought up at the beginning of the presentation, we want to leverage existing resources and document them so that we can just help improve access to what resources exist already. When we do this, we're going to try to prioritize the educational formats that we've learned are favored by farmers. a big part of this grant too is utilizing our farmer core team in these solutions and peer-to-peer learning. For instance, I think Michelle Week has already been involved in becoming the employer of choice, which is a program that's predominantly based in the Midwest, but it's been really well received, and we're wondering if that's something that we can transfer regionally and turn the benefits of their research and their work in that program to something that's effective in the Pacific Northwest. We see the listservs are becoming really effective communications for farmers when they have questions mid-season and they want answers in real time from a wide base of farmers and possibly mentors. But this is an opportunity, we think, to provide more active documentation of that so that finding answers can be a little bit more efficient and so that we're not repeating the same conversations. And one of our ideas is possibly a sort of a browser-based decision tree that could help farmers easily navigate broad topic database to help be able to access these resources more easily. And again, sort of the areas of focus going forward is to develop and maintain a professional services directory of local specialists. That seems like an obvious solution that a lot of people were expressing issues with. And then employee management support. A lot of the issues we saw brought up in these surveys and interviews were or have been addressed by the framework of becoming the employer of choice. And again, we just want to, we're curious whether we can adapt this efficiently to the Pacific Northwest regional challenges. And then Tanya's Know Your Cost to Grow would help a lot with the profitability aspects that farmers are struggling with now. And so we're wondering about how we can improve access to that or just knowledge of it and awareness. And then a lot of farmers, again, expressed and repeated interest in a mentorship program. And in terms of how to start that or begin that, that's, I think, something some of your organizations may have already begun to address and done a lot of meaningful work in. And so we're really curious to hear your thoughts as well about how that program might look. And again, this is, I think it's funded for 3 years now. So this work we're going to be focusing on through the winters when farmers have a little bit more time to respond. That was one of our main issues now was this grant was funded in the spring and we began the survey as soon as we could, but it still kind of coincided with the busy season of farmers. And so we're looking forward to having a little bit more time from farmers to be able to interact with them and hear from them and work with them. And I think that's the last slide. So hoping we have plenty of time for discussion, and we'd love to hear from all of you what you thought about the findings.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Folks, jump in with questions and comments.
Would it be possible to drop a to share a link to the presentation, just so I could click through it again?
Yeah, for sure. I can put that in the chat.
Thank you so much.
I have a question. I did think it was interesting that you're in the question about like educational resources that but maintenance was equipment maintenance was sort of the top thing. And I was just curious, like what other, like were there questions in the survey specifically about business management skills? Like for example, how to set up your own bookkeeping system, like your chart of accounts, because it seemed like my observation is that it seemed like a lot of folks were kind of looking more to like outsource a lot of the business management functions from the responses. And so I'm curious about like, is that the goal, or is it more like training people and giving them the skills to be able to do some of those things themselves?
Yeah, we didn't have a more detailed question necessarily, but we definitely recognize that the first step in bookkeeping is to have the numbers to do the bookkeeping with. And so we were thinking possibly part of the decision tree involving that first step of, okay, before you go see a bookkeeper, these are the numbers that you're going to need to have, and this is the tool that you can use, and possibly link to Know Your Cost to Grow to get those numbers prior to having an effective conversation with a bookkeeper.
Yeah, and so Tanya, the questions were not worded specifically to differentiate between what people wanted to do themselves and what they wanted to outsource. It was more general. It was more, we don't know how to do this, and we don't know who to ask to go find how to do this.
Thank you. There's a comment in the chat from Abigail, commenting on how interesting and helpful this is, and then asking about whether, like, who was surveyed in terms of geographies. Was this mostly Portland Metro or rural communities as well, or farms from rural communities?
Yeah, that's really critical. So the survey was made available online. Jay, I don't remember if we collected county information or location information.
I don't know that we did. I know we published across listservs for several different organizations in the OCFSN, and promoted it on our social media, sent it directly to all our member farms, which are all over the state. But I also can't recall whether we got specific location information. I can see if I can find that now.
Well, I'm looking right now, and no, we didn't ask. We didn't ask for where they were located. That's always the problem when you do a survey like this, is you have a limited amount of time people are going to want to spend with the survey, and so you have to pick and choose which questions you're able to put in there. And I kind of wish we'd had like a checkbox or something for that one, but we didn't.
Other questions from folks, or anything that was, like I asked earlier, like anything that you saw that you were like, oh, I know there's a great resource for this, or things that were surprising?
Yeah, thank you all so much for doing the survey and sharing it out with us. Super helpful and interesting. One thing that I found surprising was that people aren't having trouble recruiting employees, which is great. Which is, it's different than what we've heard at Rogue Farm Corps. A lot of our host farms do have trouble recruiting employees, and it's one of the benefits that they get from working with us to find apprentices, is they find really passionate folks to work on their farms for a season. So it could just be different, different farms are responding, and different people are encountering different recruitment challenges or not challenges in different areas and what they're looking for. So that was one interesting note. A lot of the other things really resonated with other things we've heard from surveys and just talking to farmers in our network. Specifically, like the seeking of bookkeepers. We hear that all the time, so that resonated for sure. And then the becoming the employer of choice training. I just wanted to mention that we've worked with Fair Share and to bring that training to Oregon the past few winters, mostly for our host farmers, but we have offered to outside farmers outside of our host farm network to participate, and really been impressed and have gotten great feedback on those trainings. And so would be happy to talk with you all if that's a thing you want to explore about our experience.
Yeah, I definitely would like to hear your feedback and your experience with that, Matt. One thing we were going to contemplate was, can we train a few people here to offer the curriculum, and can we offer them money? Can we give them a stipend to do that? And that's something that the grant would pay for. We just haven't gotten far down that path yet. So I'm very interested in what your experience has been with that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. We're also in discussions right now about what our trainings for our host farmers will be this coming winter, and we're looking at moving away from working with Fair Share potentially, at least maybe as much. And so like, again, like trying to empower some of our farmers in Oregon who are experts in some of these things to develop presentations. And yeah, so I think that lines up really well with something we're thinking about as well. So let's chat.
Awesome. So yeah, let's have a meeting and talk more about it.
It didn't surprise me that the feelings of not doing virtual is strong, but I would support figuring out the why that you had mentioned. I'd love to know what piece of that, because obviously there's some appeal to doing some virtual. Now, again, maybe that appeal is for folks that don't have a good central location to do in person. So that I bet you those answers are going to differ depending on what area folks are in when they answer that question. But I would love to know more about which piece of that virtual isn't hitting the mark for them. I do a number of virtual workshops, and there's an hour, maybe 90 minutes is the max. Is their experience the fact that they're trying to do 3-hour workshops virtually or something like that. So anyways, I support your statements there, and I'd love to know more.
Yeah, even though we didn't ask it in the survey, we have had conversations. So, I can't say that's a statistical measure, but that the reason I hear when people are just talking to me about the online webinars and stuff, is just Zoom fatigue. They're just tired of being on. It wasn't anything more complicated than that. Not that, like I said, that's not necessarily the people who responded to the survey.
Right.
But in general, that's the comment I've been hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, back to your observation about hiring employees. I just looked back at our survey, and 1/3 of the respondents just said non-applicable. So what that means is, 1/3 of the respondents aren't in a financial position to hire employees at all. So that might be why it was not as listed as high an issue.
Gotcha. Yeah, because your results are like based on the entire number of folks that responded.
Right. And, we had hoped we'd get more respondents. We had the survey out for several weeks, and we also did some listening sessions, but we didn't get the number that we wanted. The fact that none of this really surprises us, I think, means we're in the right place anyway. So it's not really going to change our actions going forward, but it could explain some anomalies like that.
So given that, not surprisingly, increased profitability was the top goal that was listed, it'd be interesting to know like what strategies the farmers have been using to try to increase their profitability. Are they thinking about better understanding their numbers? Is it just they have to get their costs down? Is it they're looking for new channels, or so that next level of detail would be really valuable if there were some way of being able to get that.
Yeah, like more data is always better. We're not planning on doing another round of surveying. I mean, it's just not in the timeline, and I think there's also not a ton of farmer interest in it. But yeah, it is a good question for sure.
Yeah, I'm thinking, and that's not to put it on you. I think for the whole group, right? As as a community, is that information that we can glean from the farmers that we work with and share with one another as we try to develop these programs.
Well, and I think some of that is helping people even understand like the questions to ask, or kind of not even knowing. And so I think there's an opportunity, and I'm hoping that the Regional Food Business Center, there's some things percolating right now to kind of do some more in-depth one-on-one work with farms, or I should say to facilitate that, and to build in a process of that, of like helping people kind of dig into like not so much a survey, but more of like a self-assessment process where they could sort of get a better understanding of like what their practices are and what they could be in terms of like whole farm accounting, bookkeeping, or, are they ready? Are they at that level? Are they kind of ready to do some enterprise analysis? Like, because I think people are going to be at all different places. I was curious about like it sounded like, I don't know if it has to be virtual, but it didn't seem like people specifically were looking for or asked for one-on-one technical assistance. And I don't know if that's because it could have been, it wasn't a box to check. It could be that it's so unusual that to have it be available that no one's like thinking of that as part of, the reality. But I'm curious if, I don't think it was a box to check. Is that correct?
Well, what we did ask, we asked, what are your preferred learning methods? And you had a 5-point scale. It's like, I would do this some of the time, none of the time. This is my preferred method. And so we had farmer to farmer and mentoring as a box that they could check, like how much did they value that? And a large percentage did say that was a preferred method of learning.
Mm-hmm.
So that's as close as we got to that way of asking that question.
Yeah, yeah. Anything else that anyone else noticed? Shari, were you going to say something?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm in the lobby at Clackamas Community College. We got a K-12 event for teachers learning about ag. I'm excited. Next month, I'm going up to Tacoma. The state of Washington has farm walks. And so I'm going to go up and experience one of the farm walks. I really like this farmer to farmer kind of model. So I remember, Tanya, we met when you did a Read a Farm event, which I thought was really cool in the deep dive. So I want to compare and contrast the farm walk event. The focus will be on soil health at a vegetable farm outside of Tacoma. So I'm going to keep this conversation in the back of my mind while I'm walking the farm.
That's great. And I'm curious, like how Shari, like if the profitability piece comes up at all on that farm walk, even woven into like, I know the focus is on soil health, but like if they're, talking about any of the kind of business viability, farm viability parts of their operation, it would be interesting to hear.
I hope so. I hope it creates that kind of trust.
Yeah.
Environment where they feel comfortable kind of doing that. Hope so. Thanks.
Abigail was just sharing that she often hears that discovering and applying to grants is a challenge, which kind of does touch on the need for TA for navigating kind of the grant process. So another observation. And I missed, sorry, Brittany also noted that they've heard about trouble with recruiting employees. Any other questions or thoughts on what you heard? Are you going to be reporting this info to FOFSCAF project team? Yeah, that could be useful. Brittany, you're here.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is I mean, that's all we've heard about is, I think one-on-one technical assistance for grant writing would be really helpful. This is really interesting though, to me. It really makes me think about the importance of figuring out if these farmers really do want to learn these skills themselves or if they want access to people to help them. And so I think I need to like wrap my mind around this. It's like, is there like a farmer clinic that they need for like bookkeeper? Is that the route that we should take, where there's like clinics set up for these low-income farmers, if you will? Or if these are the skills that we need to teach them to be able to do on-farm bookkeeping. So yeah, I think that's a very important piece that we really kind of need to dig into.
Yeah, and it seems like there's some dovetail with that bookkeeping question with, I know, Matt, you brought up at the last meeting, like the conversation around kind of more basic, like what is the basic kind of financial literacy that, like, even if you were going to work with a bookkeeper, you still need to have, because I suspect that you still need some to even, like, at some point you need to make the decisions about your business. And so if like they're speaking to you in a language that you know, don't understand, that's not going to work. So I just feel like, you know, there's always, I would imagine there's always a role for some to like make sure people are really empowered to like use those services and make sure they're getting, you know, good information. But finding that sweet spot seems important, which is probably different for everyone.
Mhm.
I've heard this narrative too over on the east side. I'm actually putting together a workshop in Burns, and one of the topics is finding grants and how to, you know, how to find them and how to apply for them. So, and those are with food type businesses over there as well. So it's a recurring theme.
I will say that we are working on kind of an end goal of having one place, and we're still working on what the outcome of that resources will be for farmer facing. But we should have some answers in the next couple months of what that's going to look like and how we can share with farmers, and having FOF keep track of grants and putting them in with deadlines and such, because that is the problem that we've seen, is that it's all over the place. Farmers have to spend so much time digging into different websites, and having it in one place would be really helpful. So we are committed to that end project. We're just figuring out how to get there.
Great.
I'm wondering if there's like, because so many of us are working on parallel projects, because I mean, obviously identifying financial resources came up in our survey. Is there like, instead of like FOF having it on their website, is there like a more centralized, because we all have individual websites, right? Is there a way that all of us can contribute to some centralized resource library, not resource library, but, you know, place where people can go to get this information? And if so, like, where is it OCFSN? Is it the Regional Food Business Center? Like, where, like, if you're not affiliated with one of our organizations, is there some place that's more general?
Well, we are trying to create a resource hub. We have a website, a resource website that's different from the FOF website. We're just building it, and it's been soft launched, but we need to put more time and energy into it. And we're working with partners to kind of fill that out in every subject. And we're kind of tweaking it a little bit because we just launched it. So it's not necessarily a FOF. I mean, it is a FOF website because we're creating it and we got funding for it. But it will hopefully in the end be where other people, we're kind of the hub where we direct people into different places. We don't want to be the gatekeeper of all the resources, but we do want to have the resources in one spot. And so over the next course of the year, we're really going to put a lot of energy into that. And so our goal would be to have it really fleshed out in every category.
Yeah, and if, you know, one of the things that this project comes up with is a resource library, like, is it better for us to just add that info to yours, but then you have to maintain it? Or do we just put one on our website? Like, that doesn't feel right either. So
we are happy to
Yeah.
maintain it. Like, that's what we would love for farmers to go to one place.
Yeah.
Again, we don't want to necessarily be the gatekeeper of all the information, but we are committed to keeping it updated. And there's functions, if there's timelines and a deadline, it'll automatically fall off. So it won't be outdated if there is a deadline for, but we are hoping that people want to use it and that it will be a one-stop shop for farmers.
Yeah, let's continue this conversation as we go through this project, because definitely, you know, having one place for them to go is a lot better than having 6 places for them to try to Google.
Well, and I think it kind of prevents the illusion that there's like all these other things out there that I'm missing. And I like nothing less than like going to 6 websites that all ultimately just have the same thing, thinking, oh, I'm going to find something different, when really it's like there's only 3 things. And I'll add to that, like, that I think there's grants, and I think there's a limit in terms of the grants that are actually and we've heard this some from, you know, in the FOF project, a limit to like the grants actually addressing, in my mind, some of the profitability and viability issues. So I just want to make sure like that like the grant side isn't where we're leaning, and that we're also thinking about like what can we do to, you know, both help people figure out the best sort of sweet spot for their business, right? And then there's like a larger question, which is why I'm excited that Chantel, you're here, but like kind of at this policy level of like what else needs to shift, which kind of gets onto conversations we've had before about the larger farm viability topic. But I think it's great to think about pointing people to the FOF resource because you've already invested a lot there in terms of something outward facing. And then just to make sure it's clear that I think everyone's heard this, but that the document and the link I shared for just a draft form to fill out, that's really intended to be very specifically for business technical assistance. So not every resource possible, and really for an internal referral tool. So a little more depth in terms of like what the programs are. So just so that, you know, it's not meant to duplicate the work you've already done. Well, I think I'll kind of transition us to wrapping up, just because I want to make sure there's time to just check in about our next meeting. I also added, or I think Andrew actually added to the last notes, a summary of a different survey that Gorge Grown did. And so that's in the meeting notes if you want to take a look at that at a future time. I think that Sarah, she couldn't make it to this meeting today, but she, I think, might be available for the next meeting to share or maybe answer some questions about that one. I will not be able to be here for the next meeting. And so I just wanted to see if that one is on September 18th from 11 to noon. If anyone else would like to be the facilitator, host of the meeting, and then topic-wise, I put some, you know, potential ideas, putting some of you on the spot. Like I said, I can reach out to Sarah and see if she would be up for kind of a Q&A on that. I don't think that would take the whole time. If anyone is interested in the challenge clinic format that some of you have experienced, but is a way to sort of dig deep into a individual organization, some kind of challenge you're facing with how you're running your programs, that's an option. Or I know, Matt, you had brought up I think in the last meeting, interest in kind of talking more about financial literacy, which would tie to this. Totally open. I won't be here. I would love to still have the meeting happen just to kind of keep our momentum going. So if anyone wants to jump up now, great, or you can email me soon. I'm leaving a space.
I'm open to helping with the next meeting in some way, shape, or form.
Great. Well, I will connect with you, Matt, and I think it'd be as simple as, you know, starting the meeting, and then we can talk a little bit about the lineup for it. And the idea is that these are ongoing. So we'll meet again in mid-October and continue on. And then, like I said, I will reach out to have a kind of in-between meeting around the OSU Small Farms Conference. Andrea, you expressed interest in that, and did someone else? Holly. So I'll make sure to circle back with you and anyone else who would like to shape that. And we'll share back with the group what we're thinking. And so if other folks want to add on, I think there could be even an opportunity for a broader, more, maybe not too philosophical, but a broader conversation about farm viability, maybe including more farmers. I know today we have at least one, well, some of you farm and do other work, but at least one farmer on the meeting here. So wanting to make sure to have them at the table as well. Any last thoughts before we sign off a couple minutes early today? I should have had you all do like the silly faces thing again to get the energy up.
I just wanted to thank everyone for giving us the time to share the data with you. Appreciate
well,
having all your
thank
eyes
you.
on it.
It's great, Holly. We appreciate it, both of you. And I think thanks to everyone just for being here and continuing this conversation. All right, we'll see
Thanks,
you.
Tanya.
Oh, you'll see each other next time. I'll send out some meeting notes and I'll see you in October.
Thanks, y'all.